You've seen it 1,000 times. A dump truck rumbles past, or a concrete mixer, or the garbage truck on your street at 6 in the morning. And at the back, instead of one fat axle, there are two of them sitting close together, joined by a thick steel bar that rocks a little as the wheels roll over a pothole. You never gave it a second thought. 2 axles instead of 1. More wheels, more rubber on the road. Makes sense. But here's the question almost nobody asks. Why the beam? Why is that steel bar there at all, pivoting in the middle, instead of just bolting 2 axles straight to the frame? It looks almost primitive next to the rest of the truck. Old. Forgotten. Like a part nobody ever bothered to redesign. The answer isn't laziness, and it isn't nostalgia. That beam is one of the most quietly important engineering decisions in the history of American freight, and it's the reason the road under your car isn't a field of craters. The real reason it exists goes deeper than a smoother ride. It connects to a number so brutal that highway engineers built an entire science around it, and it's bolted under something you watched roll past your house this week without thinking about it once. This has 3 answers. Most people never get past the first, so let's start with the one everyone gets wrong. Ask 100 people why a heavy truck has that double axle beam, and most give the same answer. It smooths out the ride. And they're not wrong. When the front of those 2 axles climbs over a bump, the beam pivots on its center point and pushes the rear axle down to compensate, so the frame above barely moves. One wheel rises, the beam rocks back and forth, the other takes the slack. It's an elegant little machine, and yes, it makes the ride smoother. But here's what that explanation misses. Comfort was never the point. The thing that beam is really doing, every second it rolls, isn't cushioning the driver. It's refereeing a fight between 2 axles over who carries the weight. Think about what happens without it. Bolt 2 axles rigidly to a frame and drive over uneven ground, and the instant one axle climbs onto a high spot, it takes more of the load while the other goes light. For that moment, one axle carries far more than its share, sometimes close to the entire rear weight of the truck. On a loaded rig, that's tens of thousands of pounds slamming onto a single axle that was never built to hold it alone. And that isn't a comfort problem. That's a braking problem. Overloaded axles snap, tires blow out under the strain, and the pavement underneath takes a hit that, as you're about to see, matters far more than almost anyone realizes. The walking beam exists to make sure that never happens. Its center pivot forces the 2 axles to share, automatically, no matter what the road throws at them. So the smoother ride is real, but it's a side effect. The actual job is keeping 2 axles locked in a permanent agreement to split the weight evenly. And the reason that agreement is worth a 100-year-old piece of steel comes down to a single, savage rule of physics that engineers discovered the hard way. A rule that turns a small difference in axle weight into an absolute catastrophe. That's where this gets strange. It's called the 4th power law, and once you understand it, you can't unsee it. In the late 1950s, American highway officials wanted to know exactly how much damage trucks did to roads, so they built a test track near Ottawa, Illinois, and ran vehicles over it more than 1 million times until the pavement failed. The test was punishing enough that it has been linked to 141 truck crashes and the loss of 2 lives. But it produced one of the most important numbers in transportation engineering. What they found was this: the damage a vehicle does to a road does not rise evenly with weight. It rises with the 4th power of the load on each axle. Double the weight on an axle, and you do not do twice the damage. You do 2 to the 4th power, 16 times. Triple it, and you are at 81 times. Sit with that, because it changes everything about that beam. A loaded 80,000-pound semi does not do a little more road damage than your car. By this law, a single 5-axle truck can do on the order of 10,000 times the pavement damage of a passenger car, mile for mile. Heavy trucks are only about 11% of the miles driven on American roads, but they are responsible for the overwhelming majority of the wear, by some estimates, more than 90% of it. The road under your tires is cracking almost entirely because of them, not you. Now plug the beam back in. If a truck dumped all its rear weight onto one axle every time it hit a bump, that axle would not just be a little overloaded. By the fourth power law, the damage it inflicted in that instant would explode. One overloaded axle bouncing down a highway is a pavement-destroying machine. The walking beam's entire reason for existing is to stop the load from ever spiking onto one axle, because the physics of a spike is merciless. And this connects directly to something in your driveway right now: the concrete, the asphalt, the ground your house is standing on. But we will get to that. So the beam isn't a comfort feature. It's a road protection device, a payload maximizing device, and a legal compliance device, all bolted into one rocking bar of steel. Which raises the obvious question: if this thing is so important, who figured it out? And why has almost nobody heard the name? His name was Magnus Hendrickson, and almost nobody outside the trucking world knows it. He was born in Sweden in 1864, came to America in 1887, and started out tending the steam engines that powered sewing machines. By 1900, he had built one of the first motor trucks in the country. In 1913, he founded his own company in Chicago, building heavy trucks fitted with cranes to haul stone and building materials, the brutal work nobody else wanted. And that work exposed a problem strangling early trucking. Go back to the 1920s. If you wanted to haul something genuinely heavy, you had one rear axle, and that was it. Put too much weight on it, and the axle failed. The tires gave out. The truck was useless, so heavy loads moved slowly, in small amounts, or did not move by truck at all. The single axle was a hard ceiling, and the whole industry was stuck underneath it. In 1926, Hendrickson and his sons did something about it. They designed and patented a tandem suspension built around an equalizing beam with a pivot in its center. Mount two axles, one on each end, and let the beam force them to share the load. Suddenly, a truck could carry far more weight without overloading any single axle. The six-wheeler was born, payloads jumped, and the ceiling lifted. But here's the part that nearly buried the whole thing. This was the Great Depression. A brilliant invention means nothing if the company making it collapses, and Hendrickson very nearly did, until it signed an exclusive deal in the 1930s to supply its tandem suspensions to a single customer, International Harvester. That one contract carried the company through the worst economy in American history. For years, if you wanted a Hendrickson beam, you had to buy an International truck, because no one else could legally have it. It was not until around 1951 that the design opened to the entire industry. Then came the war. During World War II, a crew of just 75 workers ran 2 9-hour shifts to push out as many as 600 tandem suspensions a week for military trucks, crane carriers, and special tractors for the Marine Corps. The beam was not just civilian infrastructure anymore, it was wartime infrastructure. Therefore, what looks like a forgotten, almost primitive part is actually the survivor of a depression, a war, and a near-death squeeze. And the reason it is still bolted under trucks today is about to make a strange kind of sense, because Hendrickson did not make a few of these. They made millions, and you have been living inside the results your entire life. Hendrickson has built more than 2 million walking beams, and that 1926 design, the one that looks old and forgotten, is still in production today, a full century later, riding under some of the most common heavy trucks on the road. Which means almost every heavy truck that built the world around you is rolling on a version of one man's idea. Once you start looking, you can't stop. The dump truck that delivered the gravel for your foundation, the concrete mixer that poured your driveway, the garbage truck that stops outside your house every week under tons of compacted waste, fire engines, crane carriers, the haulers that carried the steel and lumber for every building you've ever walked into, and the freight. Trucks move more than 72% of all freight in America by weight, over 11 billion tons a year. If you bought it, a truck brought it, and if it was heavy, that truck was almost certainly sharing its load through a beam. Every one of those loads had to cross roads without destroying them. And the only reason the pavement survived 100 years of this is that the weight was being split, axle to axle, by a rocking steel bar most people have never once noticed. So here's where you actually land. You looked at that double axle and saw extra wheels, maybe a smoother ride, an old part nobody bothered to update. But what you were looking at was a solution to the fourth power law, the savage rule that says one overloaded axle does 16 times the damage, not twice. A device that lets a truck carry a heavy, legal, road-saving load instead of cratering the pavement under it. An invention from 1926 that broke the single-axle ceiling, survived the Great Depression on one desperate contract, ran day and night through a world war, and was built more than 2 million times. The quiet reason American freight could ever get heavy without destroying the roads it traveled on. That rocking steel bar is not forgotten. It is load-bearing for the entire economy around you. You are not just looking at a suspension. You are looking at the hidden spine of how heavy things move in America. And if you think one beam holds up a lot, wait until you see what keeps an 80,000-pound truck from folding in half at highway speed, because the frame rail under that load is hiding a fight you have never heard of.